Good morning. Let me tell you a story. In the summer of 2021, I was with my daughter and brother-in-law in Tucson, Arizona, making our way to the summit of Mount Lemmon. It's part of the Catalina Mountains north of Tucson. There, sitting on a bench in the shade near a sign, was an older couple who seemed to be watching people coming and going from the parking lot. As we were standing there getting ready to make our walk up to the summit, I made a quick comment to the couple about how being at 8,000 feet of elevation was a nice break from the summer heat in Tucson. That conversation grew into a discussion that was about where we were from, a little bit about our families, and their enjoyment of University of Arizona gymnastics as season ticket holders. Well, it just so happens that my daughter Elena, who was with us, is a gymnast at the University of Arizona. And George and Elaine have a granddaughter who is a young gymnast, so you just know that we had to take a picture of them and our gym cat. But now every time we visit the university for a gymnastics meet, we get a chance to meet up with them, share some new stories, and cheer on the team together. It all started with just a quick comment to some strangers. I'm sure every one of you has stories like these. Meeting new people, finding a connection, it's great. It can bring something positive into your life. Sometimes, meeting a stranger, you might become the person who impacts a life in a way that you never imagined. So I was home on a Sunday night and my phone rang. It was about 9:30. I didn't recognize the phone number, but I decided to answer it for some reason. And this is what I heard. Tim, this is Michael. Michael T. Tim, we met at the Rotary Ethics Workshop 6 years ago, and you wrote an email to my principal. Tim, he sent it to me. Tim, this is what you said. Michael read me the email that he had kept. And he kept it because I believed in him. Over the next 90 minutes, he recapped the last 6 years of his life, from starting college here in Minnesota to discovering a passion for leverage finance to business school at the University of Georgia. It was a long and complicated story of a young man finding his passion and pursuing it. Michael told me he was calling because he wanted me to know that he had made his dream come true, that he was working on Wall Street for an investment banking firm as a leverage finance analyst, and that I had played a part by putting in writing what I saw in him. Through all the challenges he faced, and trust me, there were a lot. It was an amazing 90 minutes. He never quit. He never gave up. I feel blessed to have been a stranger in his life that day 6 years ago. Growing up, I'd guess that most of us heard, don't talk to strangers. That's good advice. I used it with my children when I felt they were too young to understand completely what the risk was. Today, I suspect everyone listening to me has moved past that age. So go out and talk to strangers safely. If you ask my children one thing about me that they struggled to understand when they were younger, I'm pretty sure it would be my willingness to strike up a conversation with seemingly random people. I'd be in line at the Minnesota State Fair giving away their Sweet Martha's chocolate chip cookies. One year I actually met Sweet Martha's neighbor. Maybe it was a store, a checkout line, or some other place. It didn't seem to matter where. They weren't always long conversations. In fact, they're more likely to be short conversations. I think that's the point. Who knew where this conversation would lead? I hope that today you'll start to see, if you don't see it already, that talking to strangers can be good for you. Dr. Jillian Sandstrom started researching this topic for her PhD 10 years ago. and she's continued her work at the University of Essex in England. Weak tie or limited time interactions, as she calls them, can actually make us feel better if we can get past some of our hesitation and fear. Her initial PhD research focused on retail interactions with coffee shop baristas and at museums. And what she found was that people felt a greater happiness and greater belonging when they had more weak tie interactions over time. But things hold us back. Things make us feel uncomfortable, and they put limits in place because we tend to fear things like that awkward or forced conversation. Maybe we're feeling a little nervous or a little self-conscious. Maybe we're worried that we won't know how to keep a conversation going or how to end it. Now, with that being said, you don't need to strike up a conversation with everyone you see. Look for the right opportunities. For some of you, the act of talking to strangers comes naturally. For others, you may feel the need for some training or some practice. Are you ready to explore the world of talking to strangers? If you are, then I recommend Dr. Sandstrom's website. She has a tremendous amount of resources available. But a simple search for talking to strangers may be all you need. To me, talking to strangers is a quest for understanding, to help create a better understanding of people, their lived histories, and the world we live in. I think we have to have a growth mindset and really be intentional about it. Who knows what we'll learn, what connections we'll develop, and it might even twist and turn into a business opportunity or a friendship. But that's not the real purpose of this type of interaction. It's really about that feeling of happiness and belonging that you can get. Through a Rotary program called the Strive Experience, I work with high school students that benefit from the mentoring. And when I asked them if they'd ever talk to their principal without the principal talking to them first, no one had. I challenged them to. You never know what you might learn or what benefit could come from the principal knowing you as more than a passing face. Do you ever just say thanks to your service to a military veteran when you see them in a store? I've done it. It's amazing to see the appreciation on their face. You might even get a story. I hope that we can agree that we live in a time where it's somewhat easier to talk to strangers and easier to avoid them and just live in our own little world. Algorithms can guide the content for our social media feeds. We can curate what we listen to. And heck, we can even choose the no contact checkout. If we're not careful, we can find ourselves missing some of those happiness building interactions and start feeling lonely. I really believe we need to talk to strangers. Now, when I say strangers, I take a pretty broad view of strangers. I think they can all bring something positive into our lives. They might be strangers as people, the person in line next to you at the fair, a George and Elaine, or maybe it's a Michael. Or they might be strangers who are events, things, or places. Now, I've already talked about limited time interactions and those benefits, but let me expand on that idea. I spent the last year serving as president of my local Rotary Club, and these are just a few extra strangers that I've met, and they've made my life better and happier too. Using an organization with built-in connections as a tool to make you happier, hey, I'm all for it. For me, I would have missed Dr. Maria talking about bees in Minnesota, Sharon talking about her book on families of the incarcerated, Sarah talking about Maria's Voice, a domestic violence awareness organization, David talking about Good in the Hood, Shoo Away Hunger program, and Matt talking about his amazing solo trip down the Mississippi River and into the Gulf of Mexico and Atlantic Ocean in his sailboat. Overcoming our fears and hesitations in talking to people as strangers is worth a try. Not just for the connection, but how connecting in the right way can improve your life in so many ways. But what about other strangers in our lives? I believe there are other areas to explore. They might be events or things or places that introduce us to new and interesting ideas, or a way of thinking that can help make us happier. Years ago, I lived in a small Wisconsin city. There was a person in town who was writing editorials in the paper and generally causing people to become frustrated. A group of people decided that exploring cultural identities was a way to bring understanding, and then connected a collection of strangers to organize a huge cultural fair. Thousands of people showed up that first year, and it changed the tone in the community. That fair continues to this day. In the same city, a group of Rotarians decided to start a holiday light show to support local food pantries. A huge volunteer network developed to coordinate the lighting setup, the collecting of donations, putting everything away. And with over 1 million lights, it was a huge effort. That first year risk grew into a tremendous success by bringing together organizations that would normally have gone about their business and remained strangers in some sense. What about that area of town, park, museum, theater, whatever, that you have never visited or never seen? Aren't those strangers? Maybe there's something there that will make you happy. Of course, happiness is not guaranteed. So what happens if a stranger doesn't want to talk to you, or you don't like that park or museum or whatever? Don't take it personally. You learn from it and learn a little bit about yourself. And then you move on. It's a pretty good trade for your time. So when you're ready, make some time in your life to talk to strangers. Pay attention to the strangers around you, and don't be afraid to explore something that looks like a stranger, but only if you think it's safe. If you see me out in the Twin Cities, feel free to say hello. Maybe we'll have something in common. If you see me at the Great Minnesota Get-Together with a bucket of warm Sweet Martha's cookies, maybe I'll share some. Just don't tell my wife I said that. I'll leave you with a quote from Dr. Susan David that I keep in my wallet. Discomfort is the price of admission to a meaningful life. Happy stranger adventures. Thanks, Mark, for the opportunity to share my thoughts today. Everyone, have a wonderful day.